the format I thought we would take each speaker, and then at the end of their talk we'll take questions for that talk, and then we'll have the second speaker. Sorry, can you not hear me? Is that better? So it's got to be bent down for me because I'm so short. I was just saying, welcome to this session on user needs. We've got two speakers this morning, and they're each going to do a presentation of about 20 minutes each. So we'll take each talk and then questions after that particular talk. So we'll get started straight away. So for our first presentation, I'd like to welcome, let me see if I pronounce this correctly, Michaelynn McKnight, who's the assistant professor at Louisiana State University, who's been in hospital librarianship for 21 years, and she's going to be talking about choices in chaos. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. On the news very much recently has been the damage from the tornadoes in Greensburg, Kansas, and many times recently they have been mentioning the devastation that happened in Moore, Oklahoma on May 3rd, 1999. Some of you may not know that Norman, Oklahoma and Oklahoma City are contiguous, and Moore is a little bedroom community on Interstate 35. It's completely surrounded by Norman and Oklahoma City. So we were the closest hospital to the devastation on May 3rd, 1999. And my first quote, in fact the title of my paper, comes from something that Kim Moore said many times after we had experienced a hospital reaction to the Murrah building bombing in 1995, and then another breakout of F4 and F5 tornadoes in 2001, that all disasters are chaos, but you have choices. And the first choice is, of course, do you react with total panic and being overwhelmed, or do you stand back and think, what can I do now? And if that doesn't work, what's the next choice, and so forth. So, looking at our professional responses, libraries exist to serve user needs. Well, yeah. We develop collection services and systems for those needs. What happens in a community-wide disaster is that those needs change suddenly and drastically. We have in our practice a disaster divide. We have moved our practice from being collection and library centered to being user centered in many, many ways. But this is one in which we really haven't done much about moving to thinking of what that sudden change in needs is. Library disaster planning is usually centered on collection protection. If the plan includes services, it's usually referring to return to normal services. We have plans for local emergencies, not for community-wide emergencies. Disasters. Disasters and emergencies are different. Both are unexpected, but an emergency is a serious local situation that demands immediate action, like a quick flooding of a library, the power goes out, whatever. The disaster is widespread, causes destruction and distress, and has long-term effects on the whole community. It doesn't go away in a few days. You don't recover a few days later. So, community-wide disasters happen frequently anywhere and everywhere. There is no place that is safe from a disaster, and in some ways there's no place that's absolutely going to have a disaster. There may be certain kinds that are more likely to happen in one place than another, but things are possible everywhere. For instance, Detroit is not going to have any hurricanes and doesn't have a lot of tornadoes, but had a massive blackout a few years ago that completely restricted information access. So, natural and accidental disasters, by the way, are far more common than terrorist disasters. In the bibliography of my paper, which will be in the proceedings, one article said there are 664 such community-wide disasters per year on this continent. Here are some examples of some libraries and some disasters. This is just a quick list of relatively recent ones. Actually, most of these are from 2004 and 2005. So we're not talking about something that happens only rarely. Dr. Zock started, we of course, immediately after Katrina. How did I manage to be in Katrina and all these different 4 disasters in 10 years is a bit much for one person, but immediately after Katrina, or sometimes we say Cat Rita because Hurricane Rita followed on the heels of Katrina by 4 weeks and got the rest of Louisiana that hadn't got hit by Katrina. Liesl Zock did a study of 269 libraries by survey. I should put it this way. She did put a survey out on the listservs for the Louisiana Library Association, Louisiana Academic Library Information Network Consortium, local chapters of ALA, MLA, SAA, and SLA, and also through the school media coordinators. And got a very nice 269 libraries response to the SurveyMonkey survey, which is one of those, you pick a choice. Here's a list of things to choose from. You pick which one of these. It was quick and dirty. 30% said they added new information services. 15% had a disaster plan, and you can read on the slide the other things that they did. But basically, their needs assessment was flying by the seat of their pants. In some cases, though, we were actually involved in creative new professional services. Not how do we restore the old ones or how do we just do a little bit more of what we've already been doing, but what happens when something is completely different. Evacuees and shelters have desperate information needs. On the campus of LSU, we established an 800-bed field hospital in 4 days, which existed for 6 weeks. The healthcare library services were there for healthcare systems in chaos from a few individuals who had that spark of creativity and innovation to think of what can we do that needs to be needed now. This is a picture of the Pete Maravich Assembly Center Field Hospital. Actually, this was just one ward of it. There were many throughout the building and throughout the field houses. When I went through those earlier disasters as a hospital librarian and was involved with the team in the hospital, I usually wound up passing out sandwiches and coffee along with the social workers and the chaplain. My students at LSU woke me up to entirely different possibilities. Some of them went to shelters that had no air conditioning, no light, no electricity, no power, no internet, that's for sure, and walked up to the healthcare providers who were doing what they could and said, what do you need to know? We'll get it for you. And they did. If they didn't have electricity, they brought in Merck manuals. They brought in Harriet Lane pediatric guides that tell the drug doses for various sizes of children. They went into the Pete Maravich Center, walked up to physicians and said, what do you need to know? I can get it for you right now, and actually did the legwork. Or something like an ophthalmologist who's treating someone in a sickle cell crisis. These people were yes, they were physicians, but they were practicing way out of their normal area of expertise, and they needed the services that our health sciences librarianship students were trained in how to give. They knew what to do. We also had Ann Curtis from ProQuest in Michigan got this wonderful idea of setting up a sort of a reincarnation of the bookmobile idea. ProQuest donated a trailer, and it's a house trailer that IBM filled with computers that we parked first across the street from the convention center in Baton Rouge, which had about 1,000 evacuees. And we took in our reference class students, said, you're going to do Gonzo reference right now, and they went, oh my goodness, am I going to be asked for the population of Akron, Ohio? It wasn't that. What it was people who normally had internet connections no longer had servers, let alone connections. Their addresses were gone. Some people had never used them before. And guess what? To fill out the FEMA forms, you had to fill it out online. And after you'd filled the entire form, when you got to the last blank, it asked for your email address. And if you did not have one, you could not file the form. So our students were involved with teaching people, in some cases, teaching people how to set up an email account and how to use it and practice sending email back and forth, helping people find out how to replace driver's licenses, how to fill out unemployment compensation forms, how to replace many documents that they needed quickly because they needed to prove various things to even get back to where they lived. So these are information needs that these same people did not have just shortly before that. And if you want to read more about Cat Rita, and I know it would be very easy to be romantic and sensational and tell dramatic stories from experiences, but I'm not going to do that, because that's what our literature is full of. We have a huge literature of essentially journalistic reports of individual libraries and librarians' experiences in disasters all over the world. And some of them are very well written. I use the word journalism on purpose because that's not research with any rigorous level. What we want to know is what is in common between all of these situations where they have instituted new services. Many of the articles that you will read will say this horrible thing happened to us, and we had this horrible time getting back to normal, and here's how we got back to normal. We're interested in what happens when someone like Ethel Madden sees it as an opportunity to go out and do new services, approach people with things that have not been done before that are needed at the moment, to help researchers who had articles that were due in journals that week from Houston. She's helping them with their literature searches online through other servers. And when the doctors and nurses who worked at Oxnard Clinic were housed in a hotel in New Orleans and were being moved in because they had no place to live, so they would stay only if they had a place for the families. They moved them into a hotel with internet connections, and she met them at the door with MREs, medical reference electronic packets on how to use the services they had right there to get to what they needed. So we've established information needs change suddenly in a disaster. There's no time for in-depth community information needs and analysis and marketing of new services. And how have some librarians without any prior training done it? So our research goals are to discover the common patterns in instant planning and provision of such services found in multiple instances. From that, we are going to develop evidence-based pre-service and in-service training modules for librarians based on case studies. Now, to do this, you can't exactly set up an RCT, and you can't have an experimental city and a control city and hit them with the same hurricane or whatever. This is not that kind of research. We have to use qualitative methods to get answers to why and how, but we want a representative sample. So the tally of libraries that did and libraries that didn't self-report such services doesn't tell us much about it. We've also discovered that the longer it is since the disaster, the more services they report and remember, as everyone wants to think well of what they did. And studying these self-report and anecdotal reports in the literature, even a few instances of a single disaster does not yield the generalizable guidelines that we wanted. Liesl has worked before with multiple case studies design. We looked at a number of different designs, and we thought this would be the most appropriate for discovering these patterns, for what the thought processes were for those who very quickly, in a few hours, developed much needed services for their communities wherever they were. And so we decided to work with a multiple case study design, in which cases what we're doing is we're identifying cases of such services, and then we will be in-depth gathering narrative data of 20 such case studies of a representative, that is, varying geographically, varying by library type, varying by disaster type sample, and do site visits for semi-structured interviews of multiple stakeholders in each case. The users, the other first responders, and I'm talking about these librarians as being first responders in the time of disaster, documentation, committee minutes if we can find them, board minutes, whatever we can find, so that we can triangulate from several different directions on exactly what happened in each case that we identify. And we will be doing concurrent data analysis on that narrative data as we are gathering it, primarily using a system to manage it from QSR and NVivo. We'll be using open coding, in vivo coding, Axio coding to look for those patterns, hopefully finding them. to develop, also notice the varying patterns, the variations with them. Finally, we want to develop from those composite generic case studies that will illustrate these patterns that can be used as training modules using the generic case studies. I left another word out, put too many words in it, to help in-service and pre-service librarians start the process of thinking about what you are going to do. It's one thing to have detailed plans, which is important, and the usual disaster planning involves a lot of plans of who's going to notify whom, how, and where the paper plans are. But as we discovered in Katrina, no plan can be ready for every possible thing that happened. And as we discovered in many other situations, you can use parts of a previously established disaster plan for any disaster, but you are never going to know what the chaos is going to be until it actually happens. At that point, you have to make choices then. So we submitted a proposal entitled Investigating Library and Information Services During Community-Based Disasters, Preparing for Information Professionals to Plan for the Worst, long title, to the Institute for Museum and Library Services National Leadership Grant Program, which was funded with the same goals that I earlier mentioned as the goals in our research. And we have started. We formed an advisory committee. We are creating a pool of possible cases from multiple sources, including published library literature, but we're trying to stay with things that were fairly recent. News accounts of disasters, contacting libraries in the areas where disasters are happening, our own personal contacts, listserv and newsletter invitations to essentially a screening survey that we put up on SurveyMonkey. If you talk to anyone who's been near any of these situations, and probably many of you have experienced them yourselves, you have some stories that you get very emotional about. That's normal. What's very hard for us sometimes is to screen from the story what new services were implemented in that situation. And we're actually using the SurveyMonkey not only to identify some, but also through asking a series of questions to identify some cases that might warrant our further investigation. It's been up a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and we have about 80 cases right now that we want to follow up on and find out more about. It's still open. It's still available. We really encourage you to, if you know someone who has been doing this kind of thing, to enter some data into the SurveyMonkey questionnaire, and then we will be following up with phone calls and eventually with visits with the cases that we select to study over the next months and years. These are the people that are on the advisory committee. Each one of them is on there for a purpose based on their expertise and their background. And this is the site for SurveyMonkey. Unfortunately, you can't get the whole thing on one line, so you wind up having to type it in. If you don't want to do that, we have a site for the study in general, and you can go to that site. And there's a link there to the current SurveyMonkey site to enter information. Questions?
Anyone got any questions?
It was a fast romp through through a lot of material. The survey on the back of your handout is the description of the survey, the description of the study, and on the back side of that is the informed consent form. We're doing all this right. That we assume everyone will read before they even consider taking the survey. We're very excited about what we've been able to see so far, but of course we can't talk about any results yet. It's way too soon in the process. Yes, sir?
You may have just answered what I said. You said you can't talk about any results, but I'm wondering if you have any ideas or expectations of what might find.
As researchers, we've sat down and we've listed what our biases are before we start so that we're aware of them. And in my case, some of my biases are from my own personal experience, and I'm staying aware of that, but trying to put that aside as we look at the other cases. What we naturally want to do is somebody says, well, this happened to me, and you say, oh yes, I mean, what happened to me was, and you get into this very empathetic sharing session, which shoots your research to hell. So for the research standpoint, we have to kind of set that aside. My guess is that we will find a great deal of variety. My guess is that another research question someday, which is not part of this one, will be curious to find out why in the same disaster there are some librarians who did this and some librarians who went to ground and said we can't do anything until the building and all the collection and everything is restored to what it was before, and we're essentially not able to provide services for a while. I don't know the why. I don't know if it's something in their training and in their background and attitude. That's not a research question for this study. In this study, what we want to know is what did they do and how do they describe their process of deciding to do it, and even what they tried that didn't work. Yes?
I'm Barbara Wilson from New York City, North Carolina. This may sound a little bit on the morbid side, but as disasters happen over the next 6 months to a year, are you going to try to do any observation of them right then?
Yes. We're trying to use all the personal contact. She asked what we're going to do as disasters happen this weekend and over the next 6 months and so forth. It does sound like we're becoming tornado chasers, but we are trying to contact people in the areas, usually through personal contacts, to find out if they notice or find out about such things happening. We have contacted all the state library associations and all the state librarians and a number of the professional associations, and we hope that we're getting the rumor mill out there enough that people will tell us, and we can contact people who didn't contact us directly. So I'm begging you right now, if you know of a situation, know of someone who is someplace where something has happened, who is a librarian, we'd like to know about it. We're already looking for contacts from the public library that was destroyed in Greensburg. Yes, ma'am.
What you just described, it seems to me a classic ethical dilemma of the RCT, because when you look at a breaking disaster, you know about some really good things other people did.
Right.
That you could say, how about doing this?
Right.
But for the sake of your research, will you hold back and not tell them about some good intervention that you could make?
She just made the point that as a problem that comes in RCTs, that you may be seeing something happen and you'd like to make some suggestions based on what you're seeing. Did I understand your question exactly right? I'm not sure we'll be able to get in that fast. We're more interested in what they really do think of immediately. If we do, after we've done the talking and questioning, then of course we would offer some suggestions afterwards, but that wouldn't count towards, the scenario is not going to be wait for Michaelynn McKnight and Liesl Zach to show up and tell you what to do. That's not going to be in the cards. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, you would help if you could.
Of course.
Even if it shot your research design.
Of course. Well, no, we would have already gathered some of it before we did that. I think we can keep that somewhat separate. The people who do research into disasters and psychology of disasters and so forth, and frankly, even pop social intelligence, like what Goldman writes about, human beings have a really, really heavily built-in desire to help when something horrible happens. The desire goes to the extent of doing things that the individual who's offering the help thinks is helpful, and it doesn't matter whether it's not helpful or not to the other side, like sending a truckload of kids' wading pools to Oklahoma City for the dogs that were going through the rubble of the Murrah building. Somebody had said they need a child's wading pool to wash the feet of the dogs who've been through all this dust and so forth. And they only needed 1 or 2, and all of a sudden people were shipping boxes and boxes and boxes of wading pools because they said, oh, this is something I can do. And this is the thing that in our education for the students we want to make sure is clear. Just because you can think of, oh, this is something I can do, unless you've done the needs analysis to figure out this is what's needed, it may be less helpful. One of my students put out a listserv email that she realized afterwards should have had an expiration date on it, asking for Merck manuals. And of course, it never died. It was sort of like the email for the origami swans for the kid who was dying, who had recovered 10 years ago. The Merck manuals kept coming, including a 1972 one that belonged to a public library someplace and had been rebound, which was totally useless. Okay?
Yeah. I'd like to say thank you very much to Michaelynn for that very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Certainly an area that I hadn't anticipated that libraries would get involved. I'm sure if anybody's got any more questions that you'll be able to talk to Michaelynn in the break. Am I right in thinking we've got some handouts? Give us some handouts now.
Isn't better, yeah. And okay.
Yeah, just say them if you want to. Well, now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Haruki Nagata. Did I pronounce that one right?
Yeah.
From this one's even more tricky. From Tsukuba University in Japan. He's a professor at the Graduate School of Library Information and Media Studies and the Research Centre for Knowledge Communities. And Haruki has worked for 20 years in academic libraries and he's now moved into teaching. So he's going to tell us about the students' patterns of library use and their learning outcomes. Welcome.
Thank you for my introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be here today. And this research is collaborative work by 3 people. But unfortunately, my colleague unable to come here today. So I have to do this alone. The research question of our paper is addressing outcome assessment of the academic library, as outcome assessment should be investigated from the user's point of view, as well as institution standpoint. So we definitely focus on the users. We thank that conference program committee put this paper in this session. Anyway, the first part of my presentation will cover the step we took so far. It is generally agreed that library use is indeed beneficial, or even indispensable for students to achieve their educational outcomes. But to improve that, it really does so. To what degree it contributes to student attainment of the educational outcome is not easy at all. So in order to investigate the connection, we conducted a paper survey in 2003 mailed to the former student, focusing on the relation between the library use and the learning outcomes while they were students. The results of the 2003 survey showed that library use benefits of the library use and the learning outcomes are correlated, and that's the library contribute to attain the outcomes. The benefits of library use are, by the way, the direct output of the library service, such as finding information and knowledge looked for, place to study, and so on. But we still need to figure out how student library use is contributive to their outcomes. Student expectation and demand of the library are reflected in their library usage. When we conducted this research, we noticed that there is no uniformity in students' use of library. Focusing on this point, the current study attempted to understand student use academic libraries and clarify what educational outcomes are achieved in relation to their pattern of library use. If there is a pattern of library use related to certain educational outcome, the results of this study may be useful to promote certain patterns of library use, and this process can be examined further to develop into a method of outcome assessment. So I'm going to set up our research objectives here. Explore student use of academic library, identify their pattern of library use, examine the correlation between educational outcomes and their patterns. Today I would like to concentrate on the latter 2 points because of time limitation. Before I go into the detail, I tell you that the methodology and the brief our scheme. We took 2 methodologies to do this study. The first is focus group interview. We try to understand how students use libraries and for what purposes. And the school is second is a paper survey which consists of 6 basic questions. The 6 basic question is characteristics of respondents, frequency of library use, attendance at the library use, education, motivations, types of library use, and outcomes of library use. Here I'm referring mainly to the last 2 questions. The question items in types of library use are derived from the focus group interviews, and the items of the outcome library use are also derived from the focus group interviews and the other sources. We handed our questionnaire sheet to library visitors. People are now so nervous about the personal data control due to the Act on the Protection of Personal Information enforced 2005 in Japan. So accordingly, we couldn't get the student files for random sampling. We conducting 6 focus group interviews and the paper survey, 3 paper survey in the 4 university library, Mie, Keio University, Oulu University in Finland, and Nagoya University in Japan from 2004 to 2006. Now I would like to move on our research result. First, I show you the results of the cluster analysis of the Keio University survey. The students' response concerning their library use varying from chatting to using PCs in the horizontal axis. And then the cluster analysis show the 4 groups from this data. The topmost group utilize library resources for learning task. That's learners group. To look for, they account for the 66.2% of all respondents. Next group came to the library from time to time to look for the interesting books, browsing, and this group occupied 7.6% of total. The third group, in other words, socializer, 6.4 showed that the highest rate in using library as a place to chat with friends. With this group, the library was also a place to use in group study or to use PCs. The fourth group tend to come to the library to use it as a place and to use PCs, but no chatting. This group, the second largest, made up 15.6% of all respondents. The first group, learners, the third, extended use group, and the fourth group, place and PC use, easily understand, easily identified in every library. They were easy to understand. The second group, the strollers group, however, took us by surprise because they attained the outcomes mark as high as the learners group according to the six questions. So we thought that we should conduct more survey to examine whether this result is valid or in any other sites. We have repeated this survey at Oulu in Finland and Nagoya in Japan, and in consequence, the 2 different graphs here shown here came out. Learners group is founded in all 3 universities, but other 2, extended use group and place and PC use group, are found at 2 universities. And we could not discover the strollers use group except at Keio University. Maybe we assume tentatively that such variants are made by environmental setting as well as users' needs. Then we try to find the correlation between the type of use and outcomes. The horizontal item in the figure corresponds with the measures placed under the question. What do you think you have gained by using the library? Technical and specialist knowledge in your main subject, general knowledge, new aspects or new perspectives, emotional fulfillment, critical thinking, and skill to find information, in other words, so-called information literacy. Fun to study or fun to learning. And the last one is developed the habit of learning by oneself. I did not put some, so the longitudinal side, I put the 3 university and also the type of the use. But I put 3 type of use and I eliminate the other thing and other type of use because their correlation is so low. The coefficients in the rectangle in this table show the correlation of the over 0.4 between uses for resource and research and acquisition of the technical specialist knowledge. And this combination is seen at almost all universities. So it's a close relationship. Strolling among stacks are also highly correlated to the acquisition of general knowledge, new perspectives, and emotional fulfillment. To view this result more concisely, we try to explore so-called constructive concepts of student library use. It's a factor analysis. We found the three factors in all universities. And just this figure showed it's only 2 universities because of the space. So we found the 3 type of the factor, 3 extended use factor, study use factor, stroller use factor. So we could not find the strollers group in Nagoya Nauru University, but we could derive the stroll use factor from all universities, and we put the analysis, correlation analysis, between outcomes and this use factors by the factor scores. This table shows the result. Though the combination of the use group view varies with university situation, three use factors are consistent in all universities, and the study use factor and the stroll use factor showed high correlation between technical or specialist knowledge, general knowledge, new perspectives, and the skill to find information. Other than these, a certain degree of correlativity was confirmed in critical thinking, fun of studying, develop the habit of learning by oneself. Now, I would like to finish my presentation by summarizing main point. Just first, diversity of student usage. Just because using library as a place, for instance, does not involve resource utilization, sometimes it's not considered as a proper library use. The focus group interview, however, clarifies student reason for such use. For example, libraries give more motivation to study than at home. And students perceive this type of library use somewhat positively as an act that led to the fun of study and developed the habit of learning by oneself. Second one is a mainstream towards educational outcomes. Using the library for its material or research purpose is the most likely usage that has a direct connection to student achievement educational outcome. Thus, there is a clear need for libraries to promote this kind of usage. The types of library use that is immediately beneficial for students to achieve relevant educational outcomes, however, is not necessarily predictable, as seen in the example of using library merely as a place. The most notable of such unpredictable usage is probably that of the student routinely strolling among the stacks. This particular group found in the KU University Library and could not be identified in other sites, but the stroll use factor are found in all universities, and this usage points to the strong correlation between this activity and the student achievement of educational outcome in other universities too. Students are aware that library is contributive to them when they use in this manner. And then next step, we think like this. As noted earlier, we assume that a different combination of the use group could come from the different setting of the university. For example, when the group learning is recommended, library should prepare for it, and students would use library for a group discussion place. And if library provide nice information common setting to students, they would utilize the library function in other form than they used to take. So we should observe these kind of setting closer and examine the effects of environment setting at the user's context. Now we have captured the student user use pattern up to a point. Next, we would like to analyze their library use process more in detail to set up assessment methodology of library outcomes. Thank you very much for listening.
Has anybody got any questions?
Strollers is and those who walk around the library to look for the new books and the new interesting materials, browsing, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Larry Taylor from UNC Sills. One thing that seems to be the case is that foot traffic into traditional libraries, on university traditional libraries, seems to be decreasing. And one thing that has been done to increase foot traffic is to institute learning clusters. There's a really good example down the road at NC State. They just opened one in March. Have you seen any pattern like that in Japan or Finland of foot traffic into libraries decreasing due to the fact that the libraries are offering more of the resources electronically, not that was not the part of the students actually entering the building?
My answer is the situation is same as here. So traditional libraries, traditional academic libraries, they are losing the visitors, and if you put the information commons, they can recover the visitors. Yeah.
Follow-up question to that. So the students that you surveyed were all physically in the library, or they were all students at the university?
As I mentioned, that the physically, because we couldn't get the student files, so we hand out the questionnaire to the visitors.
I'm just wondering if you can give more information on how you measure the outcomes. My understanding is that it was sort of self-assessment for the student did, but like, how did you ask them to rate
So,
Did everyone hear? You
Yeah,
to
yeah.
repeat the question.
please repeat.
Yeah, the question was could you expand a bit more on how you actually got the students, how you measured the learning outcomes? Did the students rate them themselves, or was there some other kind of measure?
So this time is an indirect method. We are asking the student whether they got their outcomes. Just this asking. If that's okay for you?
Yeah, like I saw one up there that was emotional, and I wondered.
Is that so strange for you? Emotional fulfillment is strange to you? I'm asking. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I just wondered how you phrased that question.
A little bit of strange to me, but anyway, the student answered like that, and so we put the item of the question. So they put the quite high mark. I'm not sure whether this emotional fulfillment is quite common here or any other places.
I used to have emotional outcomes when I studied in the library. I felt much more purposeful. I felt like it was a good place and I was going to do well and I could fly.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
The lady with the back jumper.
Diane Billy from Steel Frequency. I have two questions. One is that, and maybe I missed this, but did you use the results of the focus group to inform the survey questions? Is that how you use that data that you got from the focus group? That's my first question. And then my second question, and I may have missed this as well, but when you assessed these outcomes, that was all part of the same survey, so you were asking people to sort of think about some previous trip to the library, or how did you, was that all part of the same survey?
Okay. The first one is the how to make the questionnaire. So first stage, we put the we conducted this our design. According to our design, we firstly conduct the focus group interviews, and then we analyze that, and then we make up our questionnaire. So the questions depend on the focus group interviews, especially in the type of use. But in the outcome case, outcome is not necessarily the user's opinion. Outcomes should be set up by the universities or other stakeholders. So we add something to the outcome question on the focus group interview result. That's the how to make up our questionnaires. And the second one is maybe I understand like this. We have the 6 basic questions in the survey. So the basic form are not changed. We did it mostly the same questionnaire at the 3 universities. The reason why I said mostly we put some other options to the question. So we can treat the three questionnaire as identical.
I guess my question is more about how you assess the outcome. Did you ask the subjects to just think about their average library experience when they answered these outcome questions? So sort of what were they thinking about when they were saying that, yes, I was emotionally satisfied, or I was intellectually satisfied, or whatever? Did you ask subjects just to think about their average experience at the library?
Yes, we asked, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there was just one more question then, from which we've just got time for one last question.
Yeah.
Was it you?
Why did you choose the Finland Institute, not others?
Yeah. So before conducting this kind of survey, outcome survey, I did the service quality survey. I did the service quality survey in Finland. So it's just a connection, and their result reasonably good. So we asked them to do it.
Okay, I'm sure everyone would like to join me in saying